Well, I think, throughout my career, I've been interested in histories of race, migration, and I spent a lot of time researching Black and Asian histories and Irish histories, and I'd always had an ambition to do a study of Jewish history. And why now? Because I think it's a particularly good moment to write it. Although there's loads of good history written about the British Jewish community, there isn't that much written about the post-war period. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of bring that history up to date. And it's an exciting time to write about British Jewry. A lot is changing. I think it just is supposed to convey the idea that we're coming at the subject in a slightly unusual way. That what I've tried to do is write histories of people that haven't necessarily been written before, to try and write British Jewish history from a place it hasn't been written from before. So to write about groups that have otherwise been left out, or sometimes groups that are not even really considered Jewish. I think in the understanding that covering those edges, writing about those edges exposes a lot about the centre. So in that way that it's unorthodox. British Jews, like other religious communities, change a lot after 1945. You see a rise of secularism and a decline in at least certain kinds of religiosity. And you need to be careful of that because certain kinds of religiosity have continued and even accelerated. But for a lot of people, it's a period where they've become more secular. And for a group like British Jews, that raises the question of sort of if you're not doing religion, if you're not going to synagogue, if you're not um, keeping festivals, what is your Jewishness to you? So it's a very interesting time to kind of probe those questions about what Jewishness means. There's a lot of other things going on. It's a traumatized community. It's a community that is grieving after the Holocaust. Um, Although British Jewry, apart from in the Channel Islands, was largely spared, you have a lot of Holocaust refugees that have come to Britain before and some after the war. But for the community at large, coming to terms with that genocide, coming to terms with the enormity of the loss, shapes everything that comes after in a number of ways. And the other striking change, of course, is the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. So, in that immediate post war period, some dramatic things change. You've got more secularism, you've got this grieving after the Holocaust, and you've got the birth of the State of Israel. It's always a difficult balancing act. And that's something that's been a challenge for British Jews over hundreds of years. And I think British Jewry prided itself on being able to do that. This idea that being Jewish was something for your community, for your home, and then that you would play a full role as a British subject outside of your home. But I think you could argue that becomes more of a challenge in this period as there become closer ties between Jewish and non-Jewish people. You get a rise in marriage between Jewish and non-Jewish people. You get a decline in many aspects of Jewish practice. So that balance of being Jewish and doing Jewish, but also being British and living as part of multicultural Britain continues to be a live challenge for British Jewry in this period. Well, I think one of where the book started and one of the most interesting aspects of it is I wanted to explore the British Jewish relationship with Israel. And I started off by taking an interest in those British Jews. There's some 35, 40,000 British Jews who had actually left Britain and moved to Israel since the creation of the state. And it was interesting, it was exciting to go to communities in Israel that had been established by British Jews and look at the ways that kind of Britishness and Jewishness was playing out in a completely different place. Um, and once I was on, and once I was dealing with and thinking through the issue of Zionism, I wanted to think about how the broader Jewish community had engaged with Israel. And for most people, that's about fundraising and attending events and identifying in various ways. But obviously, there's also a not insubstantial community of Jews who have really quite a difficult relationship with Israel, who've been Israel critical, who have been non-Zionists or even anti-Zionists, and I wanted to explore those histories too. So I think, what did I find exciting? Getting at all those different approaches to Israel and Zionism was an interesting bit of the project. So, especially in the aftermath of the Holocaust and the trauma of the Holocaust, um, British British Jewry lives with a kind of live sense of loss and anxiety, and remains very anxious about anti-Semitism and about challenges that come in. And one of the ways that manifests itself is that British Jews are really quick to kind of step up and support international Jewry where they see where they perceive that there's anti-Semitic violence. I mean, the most obvious example of that would be in the Soviet Union, where British Jewry um, fights a sustained campaign for the rights of Soviet Jews to practice their religion and to leave the country if they want. And I think another way that anti-Semitism plays a major impact is in British Jewish support for Israel, especially when British Jewry perceives that Israel is under attack in the Arab-Israeli War of 1967, 1973. British Jewry comes together and works incredibly hard. So the impact of anti-Semitism is about this alertness to threat, this continuous determination that what happened in the Holocaust will not happen again. And that is an agenda that continues to motivate British Jewry to this day. So I wanted in the book to hold space for all different kinds of people, and I really wanted to open discussion about what it means to be Jewish to different people in different places. And of course, a lot of those understandings live in contradiction with each other and are slightly fraught. So I've given space in the book in places to some people who some parts of the community wouldn't consider to be Jewish at all because um, they didn't have Jewish mothers or hadn't formally converted to Judaism. But nonetheless, people who consider themselves to be Jewish and who are part of Jewish communities. I've given space to people who have married non-Jews and raised kind of dual heritage families. Um, and most controversially of all, I've given a chapter over to Messianic Jews. And in that chapter, where people with a Jewish background identify their Jewishness alongside a belief in Jesus, the overwhelming majority of the British Jewish community would say that such people are not Jewish at all. But nonetheless, I wanted to explore those discussions and explore those communities and try to understand, without too much judgment, kind of what those kinds of identities could tell us about Judaism and tell us about the way Judaism is changing. And I suppose the other place where community values are really fraught are around the issue of Israel and Zionism. I've given space in the book to British Jews who have been so persuaded by Zionism that they've left Britain and gone to live in Israel and set up communities in Israel. And I've been over there and interviewed people in communities like Kibbutz Kfar Hanassi, which was pretty much entirely set up by British migrants. At the same time, I've considered attitudes of most of the community, which is to support Israel but not move there. And there's also a chapter on Jews who have a really difficult relationship with Israel and who are Israel critical. Um, and by balancing all those different viewpoints, what I hope I've managed to achieve is a book which speaks to many different parts of the community and which will enable the readers to see that British Judaism and British Jewry is really diverse. Well, the interviews have been special because it's been nice to speak to uh, ordinary Jewish people who haven't been in the historical limelight before about their experience. And a lot of what I encountered when I did those interviews is people being excited about the fact that I was excited about their stories. So taking those interviews around Britain and in Israel was really exciting. We're lucky with the British Jewish history. There are a lot of really impressive sources, and you know the community has great archives, and the Board of Deputies archives, and the Chief Rabbi's archives, and papers at Hartley Archive in Southampton and in Scotland, um, in Garnet Hill. So there were lots of really good places to dig, and I very much enjoyed that process of digging. Well, I hope they enjoy it. I hope that there's a sense of fun in the book, and a sense that this is we're writing about a community that is exciting and is diverse and is vibrant. Um, because of the challenges that face contemporary Jewish communities, there's a lot of thinking and a lot of work about anti-Semitism. But I wanted to say something else in this book. I wanted to tell the story of where British Jewry has evolved to be, and I think that has woven into a set of tales which hopefully the readers will find fun and will help to understand a little bit better what British Jewry is and what it isn't.